Welcome everyone to this webinar, Creating Work Culture Innovation with Box. We appreciate your time today. First off, some webinar logistics. If you click in the title menu of the webinar software, you'll get some additional controls. Everybody's going to be on mute throughout the course of this presentation, but at the end we can cover some live Q&A, and we'll attempt to get to some questions as we go through. I'm Brian Roybal. I'm a principal consultant with AIM Consulting in our cloud and infrastructure practice. I'm also the technical lead for our Box partnership. I've had the pleasure of implementing Box for multiple projects, multiple companies, everything from standard enterprise file sync and share implementations to API integrations and complex data moves. With me, at least in kind of helping create this presentation, is Seth Klein. He is a Box lead solution engineer. He solves very complex use cases for companies across a number of industries, financial services, healthcare, retail, federal, state, and local government, to name a few, all industries that we know benefit greatly from the compliance and the security built natively into Box. Quick agenda for today. We did want to talk about digital transformation. Seems to be the latest buzzword. We wanted to frame it, if you will, so we have a basis for kind of the remainder of this webinar. Then we'll talk specifically about what challenges that companies have or that you may be having that Box can solve. And then finally, we'll get into the good stuff. I mean, some applied learnings and some real-world hardened tips and tricks that we've learned to not only help you with your Box adoption, but also use it as a platform for broader workplace culture improvements. Digital transformation. So if you're like me, you may subscribe to kind of some feeds or to some various newsletters, IT and technology newsletters. And not a day goes by where you don't see digital transformation at least once or twice, right, in some of the headlines. So for purposes of this conversation, we want to define digital transformation as upgraded experiences that are on par or better than those that your customers currently expect out of modern technology. So it's not kind of the end-all definition. Every time I read another digital transformation article, you might be scratching your head thinking, okay, is that really what I thought that it was? But at least for purposes of this conversation and how we can help within our own companies kind of generate improved culture and usage of modern tools, I think that's a good definition that fits. So when we talk customer experiences, that should be at all areas of the customer life cycle, right? From your marketing to maybe the second triangle there is your sales cycle. The third one could be the interaction with your actual products and services as they're being delivered. And then finally, things like reward programs. So for a holistic digital transformation, you want to make sure that you have consistent and very fast experiences for those customers, again, on par or better than what customers expect out of modern technology. There's a couple challenges here though, right? So one of them is there's still complexity behind the scenes. So even though web interfaces and development technologies are getting better and better at making things more simpler, anybody whose company has not been started in the last year realizes that you have a lot of tech debt and there's a lot of back-end stuff that needs to happen. Integrations, upgrades, tie into long-standing corporate systems, right? So when you're engaging on a digital transformation effort, it's not always just the front end. That's kind of what people see it as, but you often have to make sure that you have the availability and the speed and performance needed on the back end to deliver those experiences. The second challenge, and we'd like you to consider, is what about your internal customers? So your employees of the company. Let's say you're a director of IT, or let's say you're in charge of enterprise content management for IT. You have internal customers, and sometimes you even have external customers that need to, or third parties that need to use these products and tools, even though it's not like the de facto company app, if you will. So in these scenarios, we also challenge you to look at it from a digital transformation lens and think through, again, what are the experiences that you're offering your coworkers and your employees? And is it what they expect? So sounds like a pretty high bar to say kind of higher expectations than what people know or commonly use by way of modern tools. The obvious example is a cell phone. They're ubiquitous these days. And 5 years ago, everyone in IT, the big term was consumerization of IT, right, in the corporate world. How can we kind of be on par with the eBay and the Amazon buying experience? Again, this is kind of 5 years back. So now, I mean, I can give a tangible example of kind of my own wow moment where I felt that kind of the bar was set higher than what I would expect. So in my little example, I was waiting in line at Starbucks, kind of a long line, right? And I myself am in a rush. And so by the time I get up to front to pay, I realize on my Starbucks app that my balance isn't enough to cover. So a couple thoughts run through my mind. Do I dare press this new button that I see now, but I've never needed to press, called reload? Do I use my credit card and I don't get some of these experiential benefits, right? Like instant receipts and some of the rewards that come with the app? Or do I do what I've done before and try to do kind of a credit card reload? So I didn't want to hold up the line. I didn't want to be there for 60 seconds fumbling with my phone, but I tried it anyways. I clicked reload, and 3 clicks later, I was paid and done. And when I thought back on that, I thought, that is how simple it should be. And so a couple key takeaways there. One is it was at least 10 times better than my experiences with that same process in the past. In the past, to check a balance or reload some sort of a rewards card, first off, you'd need a PC, you would need to fire it up, you'd need a compatible browser, you would go in there and type in a bunch of details, hit submit, and hope that your card actually reloads. That was kind of my incoming knowledge of that experience, right? So my experience was transformed 10 times in that scenario. All right, so the goal of this webinar is to explain how to achieve work culture innovation. And Box is a perfect platform to start with that. So we have 3 big ideas here, and you've already heard some of them. And through the course of the rest of the webinar, you'll continue to hear more about this. So the first one, P&P, people plus process, right? In the today world, people and process should focus more of your time, more of your energy, more of even your design thought process and implementation rather than just the tools. In the past, this was not the case. I'm an 18-year consultant. I survived the era of software-driven business process re-engineering. Even though that's a mouthful, I was a card-carrying member of that club. I was on many SAP projects, and I realized quickly how quickly that custom development can and will get out of control and how costly it can be to companies. So I was the first one to advise, let the software kind of drive what you're doing, especially if it's a core and commoditized type function. You don't need competitive advantage. Let the software drive your process. Today, it's completely different, right? The new modern tools and modern applications, Box is a great example of it. The tool is more of an afterthought because it does what it does. And you've likely chosen it because it does what it does well. It already has the great user experiences, the multi-platform device. So in a Box implementation, I mean, I would challenge, you're not going to be thinking a lot about your design and your development of the tool itself. You're going to configure it, but it doesn't take too many cycles to do that. Rather, put your time into making sure that you've done proper stakeholder management, proper change management, you're training at multiple levels, and you're really looking at it from a process angle. In fact, we would challenge you again to say people in process really is the overall experience, right? Think of your scenarios as individual experiences and kind of are they up to par with what your users will expect. Second one, transform versus improve. We'll get into this one quite a bit, but the days where kind of lean methodology, where you map out a process flow and you try to eliminate 10% of the waste, those helped. Those made a lot of companies efficient for many years. And then organizations started thinking, hey, if it applies to process, let's apply it to headcount. You started to see these kind of broad brush 10% and this and that. But it only goes so far. And furthermore, when you start at a low-level process, you've already got the blinders on, right? So we want to challenge now that you look at an end-to-end experience and say, does it even have to be that way? Why do we even have to do this entire process? Or is there a way to make it 10 times more efficient? Like my example of standing in the Starbucks line. And then the last thing, and we'll cover these at the end, is there's a lot of stuff out there right now for you that can help make you and your teams more efficient. So supercharge your career is kind of what we're talking about there. And not only is it supercharging your career and making you more efficient, it's helping promote this concept of workplace innovation. All right, so how do you win in this new digital age? It's no longer the big beating the small, it's the fast beating the slow. So this quote, I really like it in this context. I think it probably invokes one of two feelings for you. If you feel you come from a company that is very large, has a ton of tech debt, it might be known to be that slow-moving elephant, probably brings a little bit of fear. How are you going to compete in the next 10 years? So we've got some slideware coming up, but it's no myth, and it's pretty obvious that newer companies with very minimal tech debt that are maximizing their use of modern platforms, maximizing their use of modern deployment methodologies, they're eating up market share of larger and established companies much faster than startups have been able to do in the past. You might have heard this quote though and felt a little bit of optimism, maybe even in that same vein, a little bit of challenge, right? So it's the fast. So the key thing there is, how then do I leverage that fast? So another quote, hopefully this one brings even more optimism. The future is already here, it's just not widely distributed. So all of a sudden, as you're plodding along, and you're an elephant plodding along with a herd of other elephants with you, and you're all wondering what to do, and you're seeing these little baby cheetahs that are ready to grow up and run circles around you, right? And then all of a sudden you realize there's skateboards about, pogo sticks, whatever you want to call it. All of a sudden you realize there's tools waiting for you and right there, right? So before you know it, you're the first elephant on a skateboard and you are off and running. So another challenge and way that people have thought about kind of business cases in the past is, hey, if it's not broken, do we need to fix it? Isn't it going to last kind of just another 2 to 3 years? Is it really now? Is now really the time and the chance we have to modernize? So a couple of examples that I know we've all lived through. Cell phones became cell phone brands kind of in their entirety, and their platforms became obsolete, right? When Apple deployed kind of the much simpler to use iPhone and used it as a platform for other people to sell products and services to you on it. So they kind of changed the dynamic and I mean, put entire companies somewhat out of business, right? They're still around. The Blockbuster one is even closer to our digital transformation examples. There's some pretty compelling quotes of the Blockbuster CEO. I mean, even as near of a year before they kind of started shuttering most of their buildings, openly saying that Netflix is not a challenge. They're in a kind of a different space in terms of how they're competing with Blockbuster. And some people LOL about that. All right, so how do we then not become that? How do we become the efficient, right? So we really want to think about things in a 10 times model. What we mean by that is, how can you generate 10 times the efficiencies, 10 times the cost savings, 10 times less the hassle? And in a lot of examples we're going to give in this webinar, you'll realize that they're actually more than 10 times. So a couple of examples here, being able to cash a check on the fly, right? So you're saving drive time, you're saving hassle time, and in many situations it can get you out of a bind, right? And so as you scale, quote unquote, the bind or the hassle of the technical issue, those become very costly for core IT groups to manage. E-signatures is another great example. My onboarding experience with AIM Consulting was another wow moment. I mean, the first time I really went through a full e-signature process, nothing needed to be printed, everything was available to me immediately after. It was a fantastic user experience. And then Box as well has mobility apps, one of which is Box Capture in the screenshot, and we'll cover that in subsequent slides. So is your company there yet? Are you ready to kind of make these 10 times leaps? So have you already digitally transformed? Do you feel end-to-end kind of you're there already? Well, most companies, when it comes to enterprise content management, which is one of kind of 40 plus services, right, that IT delivers. So we're digging in now because we're getting into the Box specific piece. But as far as enterprise content management goes, I mean, most companies have this spaghetti mess of various applications, all of which they probably put documents in to some level. And so what can we do about that? Box is the platform that could work across any device that your customers would bring, and for all the different types of content that you have. So the box model is really one where, one, you can use it on its own. You can do file sync and share, and it's kind of has been the Gartner industry leader in that category until Gartner has recently disbanded that category. But even more intriguing is Box's use of APIs to kind of be the hub, if you will, for all these different various services, many of which your company probably already uses. So you have one place that manages all the rules and all the compliance around your documents, as well as security. So looking at the little padlock icon, that little security icon kind of hits each one of these spokes, and it kind of takes it all to the same level of encryption, the same level of privacy, right? So you don't have to then worry about buying that additional add-on for Salesforce to do the encryption, or wondering if you have to pay more on your WebEx subscription to get more secure content that way. So as Seth likes to say, this one is just one we couldn't leave out, and even though he works for Box, we definitely wanted to cover this. And I forgot to mention, so Seth and I have put this material together, rehearsed it many times. Seth had an urgent conflict, so he couldn't make the call live. I believe he will be available for Q&A. He'll absolutely be available for your questions afterwards, and we would be happy to get you in contact with Seth. But yeah, so Gartner, in this new category called content collaborations, Box is the clear leader. If you go back even in the enterprise file sync and share magic quadrants from the days past, you'll see a similar set of players, and you will see Box even gravitate kind of more, creating more separation between itself and some of the competitors. So we do want to highlight that, as well as some of the messaging and positioning that Gartner has about Box. So in this, talks about a strong vision, right? So above and beyond just sharing files, let's dig a little bit more into what that strong vision is and why it's so compelling. So largely it's Box platform. So Box has built a series of APIs, if you will, that allow you to use various aspects of the Box service, gain all of the aspects of Box security and some of the Box rules that are built in, the global, the mobility. You're able to leverage all of that and build your own applications on top of that platform. So a couple of examples here. Here is one where Kaiser Permanente had a challenge. Their challenge was that users continually requested that they can have copies of their x-rays or go home and show family members, that kind of stuff. And so anybody who has been through this process in the past has probably seen a lot of very technical and specific hardware, right, in the office to explain and show you the x-ray. You might have even seen some cool things where you can rotate it and get some 3D imaging on it. So leveraging Box platform, which has API calls for a DICOM viewer, which is the specific software, right, that can do some of that cool stuff like zoom in, zoom out, and rotate your x-ray. Kaiser was able to build a mobile app and allow secure access to their patients to be able to access these on any device and on the fly. So just think through kind of the tremendous value that would have to individual patients. Again, to our 10 times examples, I mean, that's absolutely, 10 times I guess wouldn't even apply, right? Because it's a whole new situation, a whole new user experience that's helping them with their patients. Another example is in the financial services industry. Guaranteed Rate was able to leverage the Box platform and build an application process, right, for their mortgage loans. So this, again, what used to take upwards of 3 to 4 weeks, right, to go through a very paper-intensive kind of mortgage process has moved down to kind of 4 minutes or so. And even just in, I mean, some of the savings on this use case are pretty compelling because it has to do with the amount of interest that Guaranteed Rate does not have to forego, right, by closing these loans in a much faster manner. So great examples of how you can use Box platform. I encourage you to go out to box.com. LegalZoom has a great video. There's some other great examples of companies that are using Box platform. So how can AIM Consulting help with this? On all the way to the right-hand side where you see custom applications, that's what we just talked about, Box Platform. Box themselves, they don't develop custom apps. They do have support lines. You could buy support buckets, if you will, that are specific to their platform product. But if you really wanted to engage on a mobile application, reach out to AIM Consulting. That is kind of one of the areas that we are very strong, UX design and mobile app development. In fact, kind of going back to the Starbucks example, every time I use the Starbucks app, it's very near and dear to my heart because we have some fantastic UX and mobile developers that have worked on multiple Starbucks mobile applications. So as you come back, AIM Consulting can absolutely help with data migrations. So if you have terabytes of data on a file share, maybe petabytes, if you have a significant amount of content in SharePoint that you would want to make available in Box such that it's easier to communicate between users and external users. Those kind of use cases we've helped companies with before. And there's any number of ways that we can handle that data migration. It really depends on the requirements. Box as well has an offering called Box Shuttle that also helps with this kind of a process. And we've even been on engagements where we were the project manager and we helped set up the shuttle software internally with internal resources, as well as troubleshoot file conflicts with business owners, while Box Shuttle worked alongside us to kind of help with the mechanics of the actual file move. Third-party integrations, most of these are plug and play. Those of you that have implemented Box may have heard of Box's Smart Start offering. They usually offer kind of 2, maybe a few more third-party integrations as part of that offering. If you feel you need more, so between SSO and Office 365, I would argue those are both table stakes for any new Box implementations. But if you wanted more third-party integrations, and there's 4 listed here, but there are plenty and a ton of companies that do have ready-to-go third-party integrations with Box. We can help put those in, configure them, and test them. We can also help customize them. So Salesforce is a great example where they allow for a lot of customization there. And then finally on the core product, what we call, again, enterprise file sync and share. If you just want the basic Box applications, anybody can download Box, set up a free account, and leverage all of these applications. To implement it within a corporate environment, you do need to think about folder structure design, firewall rules, user training, and those kind of things. And that, again, is where AIM Consulting can supplement Smart Start or Box Consulting with change management expertise, business analysis, and project managers. Again, very specific to Box projects. We feel it's a different type of project. All right, so Box Platform. I mean, the sky's the limit in terms of what it can do. We would call that the wow. But let's now get to the how. How do you get there? How do you successfully implement Box, and what does it take? So whether you're an existing Box customer or you have Box and you're looking to get your adoption kind of established more firmly, I mean, the first tip is to really define the usage scenarios. In the image here, you kind of see that hub and spoke model again. That's the target. But in the case you're not there yet, right? And so Box is sitting alongside SharePoint. That's just a great and classic example. Be very clear about when users should use one platform versus the other. Your IT managers absolutely know. Most companies have challenges sharing externally with SharePoint, right? But an end user, that's not obvious to them. So in your training guides and in some of your portal type pages, breaking out kind of when you should use what is extremely helpful. You should also use Box as an opportunity to eliminate unsanctioned tools. That will help drive your Box adoption up. And what we've found is that's an easy conversation to have, because it's not, ooh, why are you using that thing that makes your life easier? Don't you know that's bad? It's not IT security telling them no. It's rather you're telling them, hey, did you know you didn't have to re-log in? Because we already have Box that does the same thing in a simpler manner, but it's tied in with our network and it's on SSO. So you no longer have to do this little dance that you do to kind of get around our corporate systems, right? So a lot of benefit there. And then we've seen customers have success moving old and outdated legacy systems. Sometimes these are shut down. Sometimes they're kept live for future audit needs. But a lot of times what's really needed there is the content and the context of that content. So we've helped companies move that content into Box have the metadata to track the context of that content, and they've been able to save on server costs and save on application licensing. Another tip, sell the future roadmap. So this one really gets into kind of the modernization piece. We encourage sponsors of projects like Box or like any other cloud migration or a software as a service type project to really champion the benefits of being able to have cross-platform device, right? The speed benefits, the native security. So be a passionate supporter of how your implementation may fit within your company's broader digital transformation initiatives or broader cloud migration strategies. And if you're not aligned to those strategies, please do, right? Because what you'll find is a cloud migration team are going to have some tools, SSO is a good example, that may help you kind of manage and possibly even better secure your software as a service application. Simplified upgrades, I can't stress this one enough. Again, going back to my days as an SAP consultant, I have seen upgrade projects run over 18 months. I wouldn't say that I started those projects as a project manager. But bottom line is, even if you need to upgrade the OS version on a server that's part of the middleware of a big application, there could be a web of upwards of 40 to 50 different servers that are impacted. You're going to find out there's a domino effect of other tools that need to be upgraded. So that whole business on the digital transformation slide about hidden complexity, when you're managing it all yourself, it's not hidden complexity. It is costly and it makes you very, very immobile, hence the elephant. So all of my main kind of tip here is make sure that you don't just, oh yeah, accept, hey, Box released the new UI upgrade. Isn't that fantastic? I mean, really drive it home to leaders in IT and say, don't you remember XYZ upgrade 3 years ago and how painful that was? So Box just increased performance and availability with backend as well as front-end UI, and we just got it by flipping a switch the other day. So don't be shy about kind of explaining the benefits there. Third tip, create a culture of efficiency. So this is that kind of workplace, work culture innovation. Showcase 10 times successes. Again, it's easy to implement something like Box, and then everybody has single sign-on, let's say, and they don't have to re-log in with credentials, or they don't have to disconnect and get on a different network if they wanted to access this SharePoint site versus that SharePoint site. So all those kind of things, likely in of themselves, are little 10 times savings, 10 times hassle, 10 times costs, and 10 times time savings. So don't be shy, again, about highlighting those. One that we've seen work really well is user provisioning. So implementing Box where you allow users to manage their own folders. Not only do they get to see at any point in time very explicitly who has access to all their content, they can also add people at their own discretion on the fly. And so for corporate environments that used to handle that process via request forms, via approval lookup tables that get out of date, via Active Directory groups, for example, that experience for those managers is nowhere near. And it's probably a 400 times, right, time success and hassle success when it comes down to that. And then finally, tailor strategies to your team and to your level. So tailor communication and training strategies. So what we typically like to do is work with managers of teams and get them excited about Box first, right? And we would explain to them different features of Box. They might like the ability to change their notification settings for a very secure and specific folder and really see the activity going on there. They're probably going to want to use Box Sync and work their travel schedules with their assistants. So those kind of features are what you would want to get management excited about. And then to the people on the teams that are creating and authoring content on a day-to-day, they're probably going to be more enthusiastic when they hear about things like co-authoring, or that you can edit with Box Sync or Box Edit. And you can explain to them the merits of each and when they would use each. The app mentioning capability, right? Some of the collaboration stuff. That's what they really care about. So if you only have a precious 30 minutes or 60 minutes to train your team, we would highly suggest breaking that out by user groups and really hitting the key messages and hitting the managers first so they could generate reason for their team to get in. All right, so moving on to kind of what can you do today with Box? Even if you're not a Box customer, some of these things you can do tomorrow. So we call these game codes, right? It's like if you had a game and you type in the special characters before you start your day, you're instantly kind of supercharged and your productivity level is notched up 10%, if not 10 times. So one of my little tricks, if I'm giving a higher kind of an executive level presentation, where I feel I want just a little bit extra kind of remembrance, if you will, a little bit extra kind of pizzazz there. I would say I would run the PowerPoint right off my mobile device using Box Mobile. It's actually probably easier and reduces less complications than trying to fire up your PC and get the adapters to work and all that kind of jazz. It may require you to have a little dongle that you can use with your phone to get to a VGA or HDMI port. But this one will definitely probably be the first time someone's seen it. You can even walk around with your phone, kind of swipe slides. It just looks pretty impressive. And it generates the culture that we're talking about, right? Using modern tools. Second one, Box Capture. The trick here with Capture, so what Capture is a separate mobile app. It's the one that's in this image here, where you could scan photos. You can actually kind of take a picture of a photo. You could scan documents. You could even do video and audio clips. And that content that you create, it goes right into a Box folder securely. So it's not stuck on your phone. The enterprise mobility management team isn't harping at you to get personal data and company data off the phone itself, because it's never on the phone. It goes right from Capture right into your folders. So the trick I like to use with this one is at the end of a meeting, after we've written up a lot of complex architecture stuff on a whiteboard, is take a picture of it with Box Capture, @mention my team. By the time they get back to their desks, they see their whiteboard. So if you look at that from an experience perspective, the comparable experience a couple of years back was the big red "do not erase" in the corner that some whiteboards stayed up for 2 weeks because people didn't want to erase it. A couple other things we've seen companies be successful with. There's a global Fortune 500 financial services company that had a dispersed team across 6 global sites. They had over 150 people that they would try to get in monthly team meetings to do monthly announcements. So they wanted to generate that cohesiveness, but there was always a picking of the straw exercise where some regions got the short end of the stick and people were waking up at 3 a.m. or who knows what. So moving to Box supports high definition video. There's a lot of ways to capture that video these days. They would shoot a quick kind of updates via video announcement. They would post it on Box. They would see who attended through Box's access stats. People could collaborate and @mention each other in the comments, and people could consume it on their own time, on demand, and not have to wake up at 3 a.m. or not have to reserve a very hard to reserve conference room. So just in user satisfaction alone, I mean, we'd call that a 10 times improvement. Another good example we've seen is a company with regions, different regional teams that deployed desktop software, right? So they have to house the libraries of the latest and greatest installables and the latest and greatest knowledge articles. So after a point in time when they kind of stood up a site, they copied over the share. From that point forward, that team kind of did what they did. They updated what they wanted to update, and not everybody globally was sharing the latest and greatest. So moving to Box, that solves that problem very readily because across global regions, even external users can have access if you'd like. You could have a single share, reduce redundancy, and increase your team's performance. So hopefully you could take some of those tips back to your teams and start creating work culture innovation today. All right, so at this point, we will open it up for questions. Give me a second. Let me see if we have anything. So I don't see any questions today. So with that, please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to hear what your 10 times idea is or how we can help you with your digital transformation journeys. This concludes the speaking portion of the webinar. I'm going to progress through a few slides just to give information about AIM Consulting and information about Box. Thanks again for your time today.